Good evening. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the City of Bloomington Plan Commission for March 9th, 2020. Can we start with a roll call, please?
Burrell? Kate?
Here.
Herrera?
Here.
Kinsey?
Here.
Schonkweiler?
Here.
Sandberg?
Here.
St. John?
Here.
Whistler?
Here. Okay, looks like we do have some minutes to be approved from the July and November 2019 meetings and the February 2020 meetings. Are there any questions or changes to those minutes?
No, I'll motion to approve July. Second.
I think we could take these all in
Want to do them as a
one
batch?
one batch if,
Okay.
If there's no
July,
objections.
November, and February minutes.
Second.
Okay, all in favor of approval of those minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, those minutes are approved. Do we have any reports, resolutions, or communications from staff?
Scanlon Development Services Manager. We have a new member. Israel Herrera is joining us as our Parks Board representative, so welcome to the group. And that's all we have for you tonight.
Great. Welcome, Israel. We have one internal housekeeping item we need to take care of here, the MPO Policy Committee representative election. I understand that Jillian Kinsey has been nominated as primary and Craig Schonkweiler as alternate. Is that
Yes, we will actually need someone to do that here to nominate Jillian and then vote like normal. And Craig as well.
We need to vote on those separately?
You can do them together.
Okay. Well, I would entertain a motion to nominate the slate then of Jillian and Craig.
I move to nominate the slate of Jillian as primary and Craig as alternate.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other nominations or discussion? Let's call the roll on that one then.
Whistler?
Yes.
Sandberg?
Yes.
St. John?
Yes.
Kinsey?
Yes.
Schonkweiler?
Yes.
Herrera?
Yes.
Burrell?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
All right, congratulations. And thank you for your willingness to serve. We have one petition that has been continued to the April meeting. That is SP-07-20, the Kiln Collective LLC. So we will hear that one next month. And just a reminder to my colleagues that I'll be recusing myself from that deliberation as I'm involved in that project. We do have one petition on the consent agenda. That's SP-05-20, the City of Bloomington Redevelopment Commission. That's site plan approval on the Trades District parking garage. That is the only item on the consent agenda. Is there anyone who would like to move to have a full hearing on that or have any questions about the consent agenda? We will go to the public. We'll see if there's anyone from the public who'd like to speak to the consent agenda. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, I'm Greg Alexander. I apologize, this is a slight abusive process, but I'm not the one who owes the apology here. At the meeting where this garage's site plan was approved, we were told that the sidewalk would be unimpacted on Rogers Street. I like that word, unimpacted, you know. We went without a sidewalk on Rogers Street for an entire year from 2018 to 2019 as they started building out the Trades District. And our bonus, our silver lining for this kind of reckless treatment of sidewalks is that now it's a 10-foot wide sidewalk between the end of the B line at Rogers, and 10th Street. And 10-foot sidewalk, it makes a lot of sense because it's basically part of the B-line. And unimpacted, well, it was impacted over Christmas break. It was closed. 8 foot of that 10 foot was completely blocked. The fence moved back, now only 4 foot is blocked. And then one of the subcontractors wanted to park something on the sidewalk, and they moved the fence back in the way of the sidewalk. And then it moved back again, and now it's 4 foot blocked out of a 10-foot sidewalk. That's not unimpacted, and I know, this ridiculous aesthetic motion that's before you, I don't know what you should do about that, but you have a responsibility to the actual comprehensive plan, which says that sidewalks will be encouraged. It's part of why we built a 10-foot wide sidewalk there, and you simply can't fulfill that responsibility if you can't trust staff to keep the sidewalk unimpacted when you're informed that it will be unimpacted. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to comment on the consent agenda this evening? Okay, seeing none, it's time for a motion.
I'll motion to approve consent agenda for SP 0520.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda. Let's call the roll, please.
Schonkweiler?
Yes.
Sandberg?
Yes.
Herrera?
Yes. Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Burrell?
Yes.
Whistler?
Yes.
St. John?
Yes.
Kinsey?
Yes.
Okay, we have two petitions that we will hear this evening. The first is ZO-03-20. This is the City of Bloomington zoning conversion map adoption. The second petition tonight is SP 04-20, also City of Bloomington. This is a request for site plan approval for the new 4th Street parking garage. So we will start with ZO-03-20. And I believe Jackie Scanlon.
Will be me, yes. I'll
Okay.
be filling in
So
tonight.
Scott Robinson on
Yeah,
our, on
sorry,
our
I'm
agenda.
filling in for Mr. Robinson. We are looking at the conversion map adoption, so just to refresh your memory, council adopted a new UDO draft in December of 2019, and PC, you guys confirmed and approved that map in the middle of January. Part of that process of Ordinance 1924 stated that the zoning map that would accompany the text, the new UDO text change would be done through a two-step process. So this is the first step of that process. So this is the conversion map adoption, and what this does is changes the names of existing districts to the new naming convention. And then after that is done, that will go here for a recommendation from you onto council, and then we will start the process of the new comprehensive update to the map. So any lines that might need to be changed or zoning districts that were created that do not yet exist to be added where they are appropriate. So none of that is being done tonight. This is taking the existing lines, existing districts, and switching them to their new names. So that's pretty basic. And then in the time since we, staff last had an opportunity to edit the UDO, we've identified a handful of text updates that this is not really for everyone to be able to read. It's in your packet if you have it, but just illustrative of the types of things that we included, clarifications that once we got into using the new document, looking at it to kind of prep to be able to use it once the conversion map is done. There were things that we found that were unclear or clearly errors, but that we felt needed to come back through and that couldn't just be changed kind of with a Scrivener's error situation. So that is what you have before you tonight. And we are expecting it, we are requesting that this go through one hearing tonight with a recommendation to council from this body, a positive recommendation for adoption, and then council will hear the petition within the next month and a half. And so then if they are to approve the conversion map and the text amendments, then we will be ready to go with the new Unified Development Ordinance once that is done. So I can answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Are there questions from commissioners for Jackie? Anyone on my right? Go ahead.
I have one, I hope it's a minor edit or suggestion. Under the methadone in the definitions, I see that in all the other cases where methadone is used, in the tables and in the facility chart, it's listed as methadone and as a facility, but in the glossary, it looks like it's been stricken, or other treatment facility has been stricken, but I think that it's necessary to keep methadone facility.
Yes, you are right. I have a little sticky note here.
Okay.
That's our one change that was like, that wasn't quite right.
Okay,
So
well, good
it
test
should just
of-
be a
yeah.
two-word removal of "or treatment."
Okay,
Yeah, so we may ask that you just add that as a condition, that be corrected, the facility be left in, and so that it'll go on to council that way. Thank you, Jillian.
Anyone on my left?
I have an additional question about that. So the treatment facility, it's referring to, and I don't have it in front of me, but medication treatment facilities, is that right, for substance use disorder, for opioid use? Or is this very specific to methadone?
So this use, the definition of this use is very specific to methadone. So in a previous draft, it was two separate uses combined together, and that's where we got the name methadone or other treatment facility. Or other treatment needs to come out, because when you read the definition, it's a facility that dispenses methadone. So it is just strictly for methadone
Okay.
facility.
So that's fine, but I do just want to voice that it's typically referred to as medication-assisted treatment, because
Okay.
the methadone can change over time. So there's
Sure.
bupropion, I don't know the right word.
Yeah.
But there are other medications that you might want to just double-check that you actually want to say only methadone.
Sure.
Yep.
Like an
So they're
MAT
generally-
method, yeah.
Yeah, they're generally referred to as MAT clinics,
Yeah.
medication-assisted treatment clinics. So
Great, thank you.
that might make it more broad, but only is for medication, so.
Great.
Any other questions on my left? No, seeing none? Okay, is there anyone from the public who would like to speak to the adoption of the conversion map? If so, just step up to the podium, state your name.
Hi, Greg Alexander again. The city recently released a preview of its transportation demand management plan at the city council last week. And one of the things they did is they surveyed several different groups, and one of the groups they surveyed is people who got neighborhood parking permits, which is mostly in core neighborhoods. So this is the group of people that live in core neighborhoods and park their car on the street, so they're already car owners. And they found that 37%, about a third of those people use that car to get to work every day. So that means about 63% don't. Even though they bother to go through the hassle of maintaining a car, if you live in a core neighborhood, the odds of driving to work are very low. This is what you were told when the UDO came before the board last year. And it's true, it's been confirmed now by a city-paid consultant. So the idea that we're going to meet any of the goals in the comprehensive plan without rezoning the core neighborhoods R4, which would permit duplexes, is ludicrous. The core neighborhoods are a huge resource if you actually want to convince people to walk. So you should go ahead and do that now. I know it'll make a hot potato, but it's for the council to decide, and we've got a new council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else who'd like to speak to SP 04-20? Just remind us that we're voting strictly on the conversion map here tonight, not on the lines in the map, just strictly on the conversion of the previous zones to the new zone names here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter Dorfman in the nearby side. I live in a core neighborhood. I own a car. I don't use it to commute to work, but I need it, and I park it on the street. And I am opposed to the suggestion that we reopen this issue about zoning the core neighborhoods for multi-family use. They are single-family neighborhoods, those that are in the new zoning plan designated for single-family use. They should stay that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who'd like to speak to SP 04-20? Okay, seeing none, we're back to the commission for final comments or a motion. I'm sorry, if you have a comment, would you step to the podium, please? We can't hear you, and we need to have your comments on the record. So just state your name, and then you can give your comments.
Hi, I'm Valeria de Castro, and I came here now because I was teaching a class, so I'm a little late. My question was, the reason why I'm here, I'm probably one of few people that ride the bus in my neighborhood, but I do use it, and I saw the change in the bus line 1, the north, and I noticed that the bus is going to go straight on the Walnut. It's not turning around and doing a little turning to the IU, which is very convenient for people who teach there to have this turning. Also, our bus, it's every hour, so it's already an inconvenience, but to be dropped somewhere else where we have to walk several blocks would be really telling me to not ride that bus anymore. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure that that's impacted by what we're voting on right now, but thank you for your comments. We are now back to the commission. If there is any final comment or a motion on SP 04-20 to adopt the conversion maps.
Can I just ask about the really interesting graphic map that accompanied our packet and where that will reside, the interactive map? Is that?
Yeah, so that will live on the website. There will be an ongoing map on the website that will show petitions for the year and what their status is, what each of their statuses are. And then each packet that goes out will have a map, an interactive map like that, showing just for that hearing.
Okay.
Mr. Roebling put those together for us, and they're very useful. So we're trying to figure out a way to have them be on the planning and transportation page so that they're easily accessible for everybody, and then you can kind of look and see what we've done.
And everybody being the public
Yes,
as well.
thank you.
Yeah, I think they're really useful to see the exact lines of not only zoning, but also what petitions are in play. It's really quite amazing technology, really.
Yeah,
So,
great.
thanks.
Thanks.
Chairman, I just have a question on a technicality. Is it SP-04-20 or is it ZO?
It's ZO, oh, man,
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's
I'm
ZO
sorry. Yes, I was
0320.
reading.
I don't
I
know what
apologize for that. I was reading from the slide.
that was my fault.
And it is mislabeled on the
Sorry.
slide there, yes. Sorry, this is ZO-9-20.
It's actually ZO 0320. I don't know where that came from.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
ZO-03-20,
Yeah.
once and for all.
Thanks.
Thank you for that correction. Do we have any other final comments or a motion on ZO-03-20?
Just one more quick question for process or protocol. After we take action on this, then it's enacted, or does it go to city?
So after you take action, you're making a recommendation to City Council, so the motion should be a recommendation. And then City Council will take it up, and I believe they have about 30 days to
30
address
days.
it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So the recommended
Okay.
motion here would be a motion to forward this with a positive recommendation to the Common Council.
With one amendment to clarify that the methadone facility, the facility would be added back into that, if that's okay.
Yep. I'll motion to forward on with a positive recommendation, ZO 03-20, with the recommendation and one amendment regarding the correction to the methadone facility.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any final comments before we call the roll? Okay, let's have the roll, please.
Herrera,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
St. John,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
Schonkweiler,
Yes.
Okay. That passes. We're now actually on to SP 04-20. Sorry for that confusion. This is City of Bloomington request for site plan approval for the new 4th Street parking garage in the commercial downtown district. And once again, we have Jackie Scanlon to present.
Great. So the petition site tonight is located at 105 111 West 4th Street, the southwest corner of 4th and Walnut. It's zoned commercial downtown, and it's in our downtown core overlay. The property is 0.17 acres. The comprehensive plan designation is downtown as well. And the property is currently vacant. There was previously a city-maintained garage on the site, which has been demolished. And the proposal is for one parking garage to go in its place. The proposal is for a 7-story building with roughly 537 vehicle parking spaces and 6,750 square feet of commercial space on the first floor. The proposal also includes some city office space and public restrooms accessible from 4th Street and 60 indoor bicycle parking spaces. Here is a rendering. This is looking northwest, so you can see the building at 3rd and Walnut kind of grayed out here in the front, and then with the parking garage behind. We will see later in the images that there is an art treatment planned for the open concrete bays of the garage, but this would be the actual structural portion of the garage. So obviously the UDO is written to incorporate regulations for many types of buildings, most typical types of buildings that would house commercial and or residential. It is not specifically written with architectural standards for a parking garage, so there are a number of things that require a deviation in order for a parking garage to work with our current UDO regulations. You can see here, this is the north facade, and here you have the east facade. You can see commercial type storefronts along the public way, and brick used as the primary material, and then again with the concrete decks above that will have treatment covering those, so they will be much less visible than they're seen here in these images. So here's an example of the art installation. It's a type of fabric that is used to cover, that would be used to cover the concrete, and the petitioner can speak more to that in a moment. But basically, it would wrap the garage on the north, south, and east elevations. And so this is just an example. This is a larger scale than the petition site tonight, but this would be an example of how that would work. So again, on the first floor, we have retail space on the southeast side of the building, and then offices as well along Walnut, a large indoor bike parking area, which would include racks as well as some lockers, and then the public restrooms accessible from 4th Street, and the stair tower at both the northwest and southwest corners to provide access to the floors above. So the petitioners are seeking a silver level Park Smart designation. So they are, a couple of the items that they are planning to include are electric vehicle charging stations and conduit to allow for expansion of that as time goes on, and solar panels on the roof. So here is a rendering of this garage with the art example overlaying. And then here is an example of the garage with the surrounding buildings. So this is looking northwest. So as I mentioned, the petitioners are seeking a Park Smart designation, and some of the items that they have identified as those most likely to meet that goal are going to be at least 75% of materials sourced regionally, doing preferred parking for low-emitting and fuel-efficient vehicles, reserving space for alternative fuel vehicles, the natural ventilation that is allowable by the open design of the building, and then, as I mentioned before, some other small features and solar panels on the building to help offset the electricity. So the petition before you tonight is a site plan. There will also be a petition going to the Board of Zoning Appeals related to the vehicular entrance on 4th Street because it is larger than is allowed by code. So you can see here on the right side of the image, the plan is for one entrance lane, one exit lane, and then one lane that would swap between entering and exit depending on time of day or expected uses of the garage. So that entrance is going to be just below 40 feet. And the maximum width is 35 feet, allowable anywhere in the UDO, or in the city, and 25 feet at this location. And so they will need to receive a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals to allow that, and also the entrances are too close to the intersection of 4th and Walnut, so they will need a variance for that as well. Additionally, the parking spaces designed in this building are only 8.5 feet wide. That is our new standard in the new UDO, but our current standard is 9 feet. So that will have to be approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals too. So those are all things that are listed as conditions of approval, that the site plan is good once those variances are received. So this building, as I said, is 7 stories tall, with an open 7th floor, of course, because it's a parking garage. The UDO definition of height is, as many of you know, from the lowest point of the building or structure to the highest point on the building or structure, and this building measures 98 feet tall per that UDO definition. The downtown core overlay height maximum is 40 feet. At the southeast corner of the building, the height from grade to the top of the corner there is almost 79 feet tall, and then the northeast corner is about 77 feet tall. And then the top of the stair tower on the north side here is 90 feet, about 91 feet. So it is a large building. One way that the UDO recommends mitigating that is by having floors above a certain height set back. So you can see that even in some of our smaller buildings, like when Cityside was built at 4th and Washington, that building was built by right. So it has a recessed 4th floor so that it feels like 3 stories from the pedestrian orientation. However, for a parking garage, setting floors above 15 feet back doesn't really work with what's required for ramping and space requirements for aisles and parking spaces. So some of those requirements that we normally include, but are allowed to be deviated by this body, are hard to apply for this particular type of use because of the space that's required for a parking garage to function. In the parking design, there were a couple of items, things that are just drawing your attention to that will need to be changed. There were some motorcycle parking spaces down here on the 1st floor in the northeast corner that those don't meet code and will have to come out. We found out after the packet went out that there's actually a plan for about 31 compact parking spaces, so smaller than 8.5 feet wide. They're about 8 feet wide. Again, those would have to be approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals. So if the Board of Zoning Appeals does not issue those variances, then the exterior of the parking garage won't change, but the inside would have to, because it would have to be restriped to meet the 9 feet. So that would not be something that you would see again, but something that could change. As I said, there are a number of bicycle parking spaces included on the interior, so 50 rack spaces and then 10 lockers. And there will also be bike parking planned for outside and near the commercial spaces for visitors to those areas. So that would be four spaces per commercial tenant. And the landscape and sidewalk, we are still working a little bit with the petitioner on improvements to Walnut and 4th Street, but they will meet the street tree and street light requirements, and we are open to possibly allowing some bioretention in the public realm to add more green space in lieu of a couple of the street trees. So that's something that could change slightly and is a condition of approval to work that out with our senior environmental planner. So as I mentioned before, the property does meet some of the downtown core overlay development standards, but is complicated by the use that it is a parking garage. And as well as those items that help it meet the Park Smart designation, like having more open air, not having faux windows. It's not trying to look like an office building. It is staying as a parking garage and then trying to be a unique fixture with the inclusion of the art, which I'm sure the petitioner will speak more about. Solar panel installation and EV parking spaces are also included. And the goal, of course, of the petition is to satisfy the administration's stated need for enhanced parking in the downtown. So based on the findings of fact in the report, the department recommends approval of SP 0420 with the following amended conditions. So it's the 9 conditions that were in your report, but including the parking space with the variance, which I had neglected to include when you saw the packet. So the variances I mentioned will be required. And we will continue to work with the petitioner on making sure that the corner of 4th and Walnut is as safe as it can be as far as bump outs that kind of help delineate the parking area, a safer place for pedestrians. The required bicycle parking will have to appear. Again, as I mentioned, street tree and street lights will be included. The last time a similar petition came forward, we were speaking with the petitioner about pedestrian improvements on the alley side, which we would still prefer to be included, even if just some lights on the building. It is a pretty highly trafficked pedestrian way, and there are businesses that derive their main access from that area, so it's a unique opportunity to kind of improve that for them. Number 6 is including the art installation will need to be used on all exterior modules where the concrete is exposed. So we just want to make clear that the whole parking garage needs to be treated. And some windows need to be added to the northwest stair tower. In the image, there are no windows at all. It is slightly complicated by the fact that there may be the walk-through here will be added in the future, but we would like to see some more interest on the remainder of that portion of the structure. And then, of course, just to clarify that the commercial space entrances will have to meet pedestrian entrance requirements, so awnings and canopies to identify them. That's not something they can put on now because they don't know how they'll break up that space. And then we also identified that northeast portion where they're currently showing motorcycle parking, that's going to need to be improved a little bit to make it sure that it's clear that that's not a vehicular entrance. It's for pedestrians and bicycles only. Something, we're open to ideas, or we have a few internal ideas to make that just not be a large one open bay there on the first floor with full access to that parking area. So I can answer any questions, and I think they have a full presentation as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the petitioner that wanted to add anything to the report?
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Alex Crowley. I'm the Director of Economic and Sustainable Development with the City of Bloomington. Thanks for your attention today as we review and present our 4th Street garage design. And thank you also for your service to the community as Plan Commissioners. I know this is pretty time-consuming, and we appreciate your willingness to do it. So I'm going to call up, magically, a different presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I have it.
I will start singing the soundtrack from Frozen 2 until... Yeah, if you go back, it's, yeah. Okay. Actually, if you go to the agenda. So, sorry to the group here for this panel that's at. A quick summary of our presentation this afternoon. I'll begin by reviewing some of the recent activities surrounding the 4th Street Garage, and we'll provide an overview of the circumstances that have motivated this new design. I will also be joined by Sean Starowitz, who's the Assistant Director for the Arts, who will speak to our new and innovative approach to public art on the structure. And then I will quickly address timing considerations before turning the presentation over to Josh Sissom of Core Planning Strategies to take you through the design details. Guess it's not working. So let me start with some recent history. As you know, the city solicited and received a structural assessment of the original 4th Street Garage in May 2018, which was completed by CE Solutions, a structural engineering firm. CE Solutions found a number of significant structural issues and proposed urgent repairs be undertaken to maintain the short-term integrity of the old garage structure. They also laid out a number of longer-term repairs should the city seek to extend the life of the old garage. And you'll see in the inset pictures that the 4th Street Garage had required steel beam reinforcement over the years, and among other fixes, to keep it open. City staff and CE Solutions continued to monitor the garage through the summer and fall of 2018 and noticed that deterioration was continuing despite repair efforts. In January 2019, therefore, the city determined that the 4th Street Garage should be closed for safety reasons. This began a process in 2019 to evaluate the best plan moving forward to reinstate this critical parking capacity to the downtown. Ultimately, City Council determined that the cost to extend the life of the old garage did not make sense and approved funding for a new structure to be built in the same location with incremental parking capacity. This approval also came with mutually agreed upon criteria for the new structure, which I will detail shortly. If you change the slide, please. So based on the approval for the new structure, the city began demolition of the existing and now closed garage in the fall of 2019. At the same time, the city continued to engage with the property owner to the south of the garage in an effort to acquire the property for an extension of the garage footprint to 3rd Street. This effort included good faith negotiations with the owner, followed by an eminent domain effort, which ultimately stalled with a disappointing ruling for the court against the expansion effort. The city may continue that effort, but it has determined that the time frame associated with the appeal would be unsustainable in the short term, given the pressures on downtown parking. Thus, what you have before you this evening is a design on the original footprint. We're moving forward with this today to ensure we get capacity back online as quickly as possible. So before Josh details our revised design, I wanted to remind us all about the role the 4th Street Garage has played in the downtown, which is important as you consider scale and capacity in our new design. The garage was built in 1985 at a time that the downtown was languishing. You'll see here an aerial photo of downtown in 1986. This is looking down south, towards the south from approximately 8th Street. The purpose of the garage was to stimulate commercial activity downtown, support the renovation of the Fountain Square Mall, and turn around the 20-year exodus from downtown that had left the downtown a shadow of its former self. On March 2nd, 1985, Bill Pittman, a journalist for the Herald Times newspaper, wrote, and I quote, "The sidewalk from the second downtown parking garage to Fountain Square is in use. Renovation, remodeling, and reconstruction is underway on a number of smaller private projects. A decade ago, Bloomington was in the doldrums. Downtown merchants were bleeding financially. Then, William A. Cook, who has served as Bloomington pretty much as the Lilly Endowment has served Indianapolis, stepped in alongside with CFC, the real estate arm of Cook Group, end quote. And the investments worked. Now we have a vibrant downtown thanks to a coordinated effort by the public and private sectors to stimulate, I think you're up one, to stimulate commercial and residential development and cultural activity. We attract 1.5 million visitors each year to town. We have strong employers on and near the square. While we have some retail vacancies, we're fortunate to have robust, ongoing investments in the heart of our downtown. People come to our community from nearby and from far away. We have more than 16,000 people who commute to Bloomington, or to Monroe County each day. That's in addition to our residents who come to work, shop, eat, and play in our downtown. Unfortunately, almost 63% travel alone in their vehicles. And while we can take some solace that that's about 20 points less than the 83% average for the state of Indiana, we still need to work on getting that number down. Our recently finalized transportation demand management plan will help us do that. Even so, some significant number of drivers will need to park. And the best way to park them is in a centralized parking structure. That will reduce our reliance on the many surface lots around the city, a terrible use of high-value land, and free up that land for housing development or offices or other better uses. Put another way, we're building this parking capacity for the next 50 years with the expectation that structured parking will be the last parking to be retired in the city, which is why we have sought to maximize the capacity in our design. Let me say a few words about the scale and size of the garage relative to its surroundings. One thing that's difficult to do as a resident is to project out to the future when assessing present choices. As you know, we're asked to do this all the time as city officials because we're often planning decades into the future. It's sometimes hard to imagine what an area might look like 5 or 10 years from now when it looks radically different today. This is one of those cases. Currently, the corner of 3rd and Walnut is a bit of a wasteland. It's dominated by empty parking lots. The Napa store sticks out like a sore thumb, and the streetscape is uninviting. It's not a vibrant area. But, as you see here, when the convention center is developed, with its corresponding hotels and other amenities, right across the street, this area will be transformed. It will be at a scale we're not used to in Bloomington, and that will be a good thing for our economy and for our community overall. And the garage will be an appropriate scale relative to those new buildings. I know you know how important to the downtown the convention center will be to drive additional economic vibrancy in our community, especially outside of football weekends and other tourist periods. And please note, this image is one scenario of a potential number of site design scenarios. You'll see this has the hotel to the south of a mid-sized hall. Another scenario, which Josh will show you, has the hotel on 3rd Street, which was based on public input. In either case, the basic point is that the massing of this area in the future will be significantly taller than what there is now. Regarding scale, I should also point out that there is a 25-foot drop between the square and this site. So as you think about height and scale here, know that this is at the base of a hill, which certainly makes it less visually impactful as you look to the north. If you could switch. All this to say, as you evaluate the sale of the structure, I urge you to consider not what it would look like relative to its surrounding area in the summer of 2021 when it opens, but rather what it will look like and how much it will be needed in 2025 as the entire neighborhood around it transforms. We're solving for demand that will be materializing starting in a couple of years. All these people, pictured here, who will come to our convention center, our expanded convention center, will be encouraged and guided to frequent our downtown amenities, whether restaurants, theaters, storefronts. And this is good for everyone in Bloomington. Good switch. So before I turn the presentation over to Sean to talk about the integration of public art at the garage, I want to remind you of the commitments the project will deliver to the community as part of its design. These are listed on the screen and include not only a robust electric vehicle charging infrastructure from the start, but the ability to expand it as demand increases. It includes solar panels to offset the building's energy demands, room set aside for bikes, smaller cars, and carpoolers. This garage will be a hub from which folks that come to town can head out into destinations by foot or transit or other shared mobility infrastructure. That, in addition to a robust maintenance plan, public restrooms, a transportation hub drop-off and pickup system, it's projected to be among the first Park Smart garages in the state, which is the garage equivalent of LEED, and will highlight Bloomington's commitment to public art. So let me pause and turn the podium over to Sean to talk about one of the garage's many innovations, which is its integration of public art.
Can we go to the next slide? Good evening, Sean Starwitz. Thanks for the time. So just to clarify too, it's not fabric. This is an aluminum paneled structure. Fabric wouldn't last that long on this structure. But so just to give you all a timeline, we solicited 2 proposals from 2 public art groups, Project One and a group called Law Office, which is based out of Columbus, Indiana. Project One was based out of Indianapolis, and we, through the Bloomington Arts Commission, through our 1% program, which is how this project is being funded, 1% of the total budget of the construction of the garage goes towards commissioning public art. Because of the timing of this project, we were really interested in integrating the artwork into the facade of the garage, which unfortunately, in terms of the history of our 1% program, the fact that I'm the second full-time arts director, we haven't been able to do that historically. So this is the first project in Bloomington Art Commission history where the project has really truly been integrated into the architectural design and construction of the project, which is very significant. And I'm going to speak about the Project One urban fabric concept, which is they sought to create an exciting and uplifting piece that represents the diversity and inclusiveness of Bloomington, as well as its dedication to public art. And I want to remind the Plan Commission that we were the first city in Indiana to adopt the 1% program, which is a pretty integral aspect of our art support over the year. It's a basic quilt block pattern that's similarly based off of former council member Tim Mayer's design of our City of Bloomington logo. And it has been subdivided and recontextualized into a new patterning. So that's what you're kind of seeing. And I think we can go to the next slide. This is a little bit pixelated, but it kind of is almost, if you think about patchwork quilts, that's essentially what this design is. Over the course of the last year with the Bloomington Arts Commission, we have sought a variety of different kinds of community feedback, and we are currently updating our public art master plan. And a lot of the feedback we got from the garage design and the convention center design was the integration into the architectural elements. So a couple of these other, that's actually a parking garage. The kind of crazy Van Gogh looking structure is Mark Furnez's work, based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And then these are 2 other parking garage examples that the public generated interest in terms of how we could integrate public art into our architectural element in our changing built environment. The project is value engineered from a variety of different ways. The budget is extremely tight for the structure that it is. 1% is not a lot of money, even though it might seem like it is. It is not in terms of large-scale projects like this. So it's aluminum panels that are, it's about 3,100 square feet of panel surface, so 36% of the parking garage structure is covered, and 64% is open due to some engineering challenges like natural light being let in and then fume exhaustion. So letting kind of natural fumes from the parking garage come in and out. And I think that's basically my time, and I can hand it back over to Alex, or is it going to Josh? Great, thank you.
What's that, 6 minutes? Okay. So just before I hand it to Josh, timing considerations. So we're asking you to consider reviewing and approving potentially this design tonight in one meeting. And the reason is we are looking, if you advance the slide, to the end of the project, which is sort of a critical moment. When is the project complete? When will the garage be activated? And how does that fall relative to the return of students next year? As you probably know, the fall has a lot of permitting activity, and we're trying to beat that. So it's not to say that it's impossible with a vote next month to try to make that deadline, but as you know, with construction projects, you run into surprises. Weather sometimes works for you and sometimes it doesn't. So by voting tonight, you would be significantly increasing our likelihood of making that schedule. Otherwise, it would just be riskier to try to make that schedule, and we're doing everything we can, given the hand that we were dealt, to try to still get done before that return of students. So I know it's a big ask. I appreciate you considering it, and I'm going to turn it over to Josh for some design summaries.
Okay, so we have 5 minutes left. My name's Joshua Sism with Core Planning Strategies. I've had the luxury of working with the city as the project manager for this garage as well as trades. So I'm no stranger to the challenges we have faced, and I want to say before I get into the next slides that I have some compliments to make. One is to the resiliency of the city to deliver this amenity and navigate through the challenges. Number 2 is CSO Architecture, who has been very quick and prompt in tailoring the design to fit the original parcel. That has taken a lot of work and a lot of resources. And lastly, to planning staff, who has given us a lot of very good guidance, really from the outset. So I will say that a lot of this project remains the same. The amenities and positive changes that we'll be making on Walnut, for instance, remain the same. We control the sidewalks, so we can deliver that, and the planting amenities and make those accommodations. Next slide, please, if you would. So I think it's a good starting place to talk about what we've lost. Welcome to the new commissioner. Most of you have already seen this. This will be familiar. So we had a 3rd Street entrance exit on the south end of the parcel. That, of course, is no longer viable because we do not have access to that property. We have, as such, reduced our commercial space. That's commercial use. It might be retail. It might be public interest space. There's a lot of ways that could be purposed. So that's been reduced by 2,000 square feet, again, because our footprint has shrunken to the north, staying on the original garage parcel. We have talked about potentially an elevated bridge that would span over to a new hotel or something that lies across south of 3rd Street. That's going to be pretty tough as it stands today. We can't span over the existing parcel, but we have given thought to what the future may bear out. There's a potential that someday, perhaps, that will come into our control, and you will see in some of the design how we have made it, the current design, something that can be expanded over time. And we lost, of course, the full city block for a parking deck configuration. We had to respond to the asks made of us, a certain capacity measure, and Alex did a terrific job of explaining about building to capacity. You don't build for you don't make an investment of this size for today's demand capacity. You invest today knowing that this needs to serve over time. Last thing we want to do is be here in 3 or 4 years and say, oh yes, well it turns out that it was too small, so we had to go up. Please advance, thank you. So again, RDC project requirements, they remain unchanged. We have delivered all of these requirements, and we're really proud to say that, well, we did have to scale it back considerably. We went up a little bit as a result, but we have still yielded what was determined to be the need of the community with this parking structure. Next slide, please. So let's talk about height. That's going to be one of our big challenges, and I know gets a lot of discussion. So advance, please. So a couple of market references. Another point that Alex made, we talked about earlier today, that Bill Rigger was kind enough to give us as a great engineering reference, the delta or difference between 3rd Street and Kirkwood on Walnut is 25 feet. So it's I think, inappropriate to think that this is going to be towering over the square. The square is the crown, is the dome and the jewel of the city. And this garage is really going to plot out at a very, I think, regular level. You look at the potential high-density development that Alex talked about, and then we have the county garage over here on Morton that's 80 to 84 feet high. So those are a good couple market references. Advance, please. Thank you. 35 seconds? Okay, thank you. So I think you've seen these slides. What I will say in closing with limited time, seeing the staff's recommendations, those are very easily accommodated. I think in short order, we can achieve our schedule, which advance the schedule slide if you would please. One more, please. And again, and again, and again. Keep going until you see a schedule. There we go. Oh, back up. So Alex talked about the criticality of the IU 21-22 fall start and getting this activated before the students arrive. It's also very critical, frankly, that we get this started on time now, and we're aiming for a construction start to occur before the arrival of students this fall. And so this is a very, very tight schedule for us to orchestrate. And so I would ask that you do grant us approval. There was one slide. I'll ask you to back up, please. Back up. Back up. It's the corners. Keep going. Keep going. There we go. So you'll notice that we have tried to keep the building intentionally low as it sits on Walnut to the maximum of our ability. The high areas are the towers that allow an elevator to serve the upper deck. That's really what they are, a little stairwell and a little elevator, and they are pushed back against the alley. So we did not intend for this to be a piece to call attention at the front of the building. So with that, I would ask for your approval this evening, understanding that we are absolutely able to work with the 9 stipulations that staff has asked, and I think we can do it in very short order. So I appreciate your time, and I think we'll move on to questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions from commissioners for either the staff or the petitioner? We'll start on my left this time. No? Okay. Okay.
What is the transportation drop-off pickup hub you talked about? What does that mean? Is it?
So the idea here is to have a design that allows us to easily bring transportation in. So whether that's Uber, Lyft kind of stuff, or and so what we're really trying to envision and encourage is that people come into this structure, leave their car, and then go elsewhere, either by foot or some other transportation mean, so that we're consolidating. We're not having people drive all around town looking for parking spots.
Okay. Then I had another question about the lighting that is triggered to go 50% of the lighting goes on and off by usage. How does that affect safety, like at night? Is that how does that work?
I'm sorry, was that a question about safety?
Yeah, so like somebody, I think that's a great idea. I was just curious if someone drives in with their car and the light is activated, of course, somehow. How does that work if someone's walking to their car late at night?
Sure. So this is a motion-activated system. It is a balancing. So it's not as though you're going to have a completely dark floor. It's a matter of foot candles being the amount of lighting. So they're going to be moderately lit or heavily lit based on the traffic, be it foot traffic or vehicular traffic.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
I wanted to point out too, I don't know if you can see it, but this is the site plan, and you'll see the little bump in on Walnut to the left. So it's a little notch down at 3rd and Walnut that bumps in and creates effectively a long lane that's protected by berms on the north and south.
Great. And then I was curious, how much is the 1%? You said that.
For this specific project, it's $385,000.
Okay. And then the only other note about the art is it recommends dark crash walls to enhance the art instead of light. So, but you can't afford that in your 385,000. So there, it said something in here about including that in the construction budget.
That is what.
Is that happening or?
Yeah, so this originally, Urban Fabric was designed for the larger footprint, so we're working with Project One on negotiations about the new contract and what the crash wall will look like. So we're currently looking at that. But for the aesthetics overall, for the parking garage, it's recommended that the crash wall be dyed. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So,
Or
so
colored.
So you're trying to include that in the
Yes.
like construction, but okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Okay, any questions on my right?
All set. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I have one quick question
ma'am.
about the alleyway improvements.
Yeah.
I'm interested in, is it just primarily lighting, or is I mean, that's going to get pretty torn up. I just wonder what the
That's a
improvements might
terrific
be.
question, and I'm glad that staff brought it up, because we've given a lot of thought about what we will do. The foundation and the wall will sit back off of the alley a few feet. This is not 10 feet, 12 feet, but probably about 3 or 4 feet. So that's not going to be for vehicles to use. That lane remains same. But we're thinking that there's a amount of space so that we can do some interesting things with, whether that be seating. Hard to say. We want to work with as you probably know, there are a lot of active businesses back there in the alley. In fact, I've laughed with some of them saying, you're no longer the back door because the garage is gone. But we think that there is a real good relationship that we can play off there. We had thought about the aesthetic of arts back there in the tradition that has been the case, which frankly is a little bit of graffiti. We're not really embracing that. We want to make sure that the cars are protected and that there is a clear delineation between the two. But we have given some thought to what that would look like creatively. I can't give you a definitive answer because I think it's in concert with the neighbors across the alley.
And what does that side then look like? It's just, obviously, it won't have the art feature.
True.
But what will it look like? I don't know if there was a slide in here that gives.
There is. We'll get to it here in just a moment. There it is. Yep.
Okay.
It is, frankly, looks a lot like a regular parking garage. But it's realizing that it's obscured by buildings itself to a large extent. You really can't see when you're running down College. You're so close to those buildings surrounding College, you can't see above them. So we did not want to put glass back there on the entryways. We felt that vandalism might be an issue there.
Okay. And then I just had one last question. I was reading the Environmental Commission report, and there was a suggestion about Gold Smart parking, and I wondered, what's the difference there? And not that we should, achieve the highest level here, but what's the main difference, and what are we losing by not pursuing gold?
Well, we pursue the highest that we can get with reasonable cost. So this is, if you're familiar with LEED, LED buildings, this is an offshoot of LEED. It's the LEED for parking garages. So our aim is to achieve the highest certification that we can without driving up the cost associated to get that gold certification, which LEED, Platinum is a very expensive undertaking. So we're trying to maximize the point scoring methodology so that we can get a silver. Could we get a gold? I think it would be a reach, but we are going to pursue every point for Park Smart that we can obtain and obtain the highest certification achievable.
Thanks.
Okay. I've got a couple of questions. First for staff, you mentioned that there were some motorcycle parking spaces that are being removed because they're not allowed by code. Can
Yeah,
you
so
talk a little more about that? What what's not allowed
They're,
about that design?
They don't meet our minimum parking space requirement for vehicles. So they're shown here on the first floor site plan. Let me see.
There you go.
They're shown in this area here with the bike parking, 6 motorcycle parking spaces, and we don't have a delineation for that in code. So a motorcycle would just park in a regular parking space here in town. So like we discussed a little bit with 9 feet being the current requirement, 8.5 is what we're going to. The code, new code does allow for some minor modifications, so once we get to the new code, petitions that file under the new code could possibly have a little bit smaller, but these are quite small spaces. They don't come close to our minimum width and length requirements.
And so there will be no motorcycle parking then?
There will be no, they could designate other parking spaces as motorcycle parking if they chose to do so, but these 6 spaces won't be allowed to be put here at this location. That would require a variance to allow that. They would have to show that the property is unique and needs to be allowed to have small parking spaces because it's not a code
So what will
allowance.
go there then instead of those spaces?
Sorry, what will be there?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure. So potentially more bicycle parking or, we haven't gotten that far.
I think that's a fair assumption. A natural assumption would be more, I call it the bike depot, because I think that's where
So
everything
these are
cycling
all
is happening.
parking hoops here, and then these are the, for bicycles, and then these are the bike lockers. And so then these were like, the idea, I assume, would be to come in and leave your motorcycle here. But one, you can't have a drive cut here, so then that would just be coming in off the sidewalk, which would be atypical for us for a vehicle. So it would have to come in from the inside and then past these bike parking, and they just don't meet code requirements either. But they could delineate other spaces in the building as motorcycle parking if that was a preference.
Well, so using a full parking space to park a motorcycle is not a great use of space, and much less for smaller scooters, which are increasing in popularity. So
That's what I really think was in mind here were smaller motorized vehicles, Groms if you're a cyclist or motorcyclist. But this, again, I speak to our willingness to work with planning staff to reutilize that more than likely for cycling use, and then determine whether or not we want to apportion some of the garage for motorcyclists, which I think there's a demand for.
So I guess my question is, if we were to update the code to allow for specifically motorcycle parking spaces that were smaller, would this design accommodate that?
Absolutely.
Later on?
It would. If you were to stripe it, as to use the parking terminology, if you were to stripe it as it is today, take the motorcycle spots out of the bike depot, and you were to stripe it today, you could absolutely restripe it for another sized, understanding that it's maybe not a 1-for-2 type shift, if you follow my logic.
So you're saying we could just swap out full-size
Yes,
vehicle
sir.
spots? We just wouldn't have it in this same location?
That's correct.
So this design essentially prohibits some future motorcycle parking in that location. It would just be mixed in with the other vehicle parking. Is what
Yeah,
you're saying.
that's right. And we would fall in with the recommendation of staff to delete that and alter it.
And how does this design compare to both the current garage and the previous design that we saw in terms of total vehicle spaces?
A slight increase in this design, nominal. We have a comparison slide. Sorry, time did not allow us at the time, but if you'd like to.
Could you pull
cycle
that
to
up for us,
Jackie.
please?
There it is. Yep. So there's your comparison. And from a design standpoint, which I think was the initial question that you asked, it's very similar in its design nature. It's a piered column building where the lion's share of the concrete sits on piers that sit on bedrock. It's got what I call a center spine, which are center columns that hold up the center of the structure. So that is the same approach that was intended had we gone all the way down to 3rd Street. It would have just been a longer spine, if you will, down the middle of the building.
So this is, if my math is correct, so 35 spaces more, excuse me,
Yes.
than the original design?
Yes. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Excuse me?
So this design is 35 spaces over what the previous design was?
It's a little less than that. We got
sorry,
510
23.
versus 533.
The total
but,
23, I see. And how many were in the previous garage?
Funny you should ask. That's what Alex was saying. 350? 352.
352. Okay, thank you. That's all I have. Any other questions from the commission? Okay, seeing none, I think it's time to go to the public.
Okay. Thank you.
Could we just get a quick show of hands if you are planning to give comment here? Okay, great. If you would please just step up to the podium, state your name for the record. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes. I think we'll have a timer going to help you stay on track. And please, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Nick Blandford. I am on the Arts Commission. I am the chair of our Public Art Planning Committee. Sean spoke to the integrated art aspect of this, and I just want to sort of double down on how important this is to us. This is the first project we've been able to pursue this path. Not only is it a better use of the 1% funding, rather than building a structure and saying, hey, tack on some artwork to the outside with whatever space is available. It's actually integrated into the design. It's not as obtrusive. It's actually part of the whole. But in addition to that, it represents good cooperation between departments within the city and commissions within the city. One note I don't think Sean was able to get to, but I wanted to highlight is sustainability was also a concern in the design from Project One. In addition to allowing for sun and fumes to pass in and out of the building, the actual aluminum stamping design with the triangular cutouts allows for minimal waste. So imagine like a template grid where they're sort of punching out triangles. It's all sort of laid out in a way to avoid extra waste. So sustainability was a concern that we listened to, and yeah, we on behalf of the commission, we would support this resolution. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Greg Alexander. I hope you got on page 44 of your packet, I have a little parking study for you all. Continuing a tradition started almost 15 years ago by Buff Brown. He came in 2006 and he showed you all that between our 3 public garages, we have an entire garage of extra space that's not being used. And this really puts that to the test because we closed one of those 3 garages. And you can see from my study there that there's probably about 216 spaces available at peak occupancy just between the 2 garages. And if you look at the 2 lots by the convention center, the Napa lot and the back lot, those only represent 140 cars. So even if those closed today and no usage changed whatsoever, we would still have a little extra space in the garages. They're not exactly full. This comes as our transportation demand management plan, which was previewed last week, suggests raising the price of parking by 50% to discourage use of parking downtown so that people have an incentive to use the bus or bike or whatever. And so you would kind of expect, given the rest of our city's plans put together, that we should be anticipating less usage of garages rather than more. So I mean, if you built this right now, we'd have 700 empty spaces downtown. We I've heard the suggestion that this body doesn't have a decision to make because the council already made the decision, and I think that's hogwash. The council made a financial decision. It funded the garages, but you guys have a responsibility to the comprehensive plan, the zoning plan, and the transportation plan, which all say that pedestrians are our first priority, that making downtown pedestrian accessible and the neighborhoods pedestrian accessible is our first priority. The transportation plan actually has a little diagram showing that pedestrians are even a higher priority than bicyclists, which are higher priority than cars, and yet we're proposed to turn this huge space into just parking. The sidewalks at 4th Street and Walnut, have already been closed for this project, and they've been closed for 6 months since last September. And there have been 2 pedestrian fatalities within a block of that closure. Like, this is a very stressful pedestrian environment, a very dangerous pedestrian environment, and the city has simply taken away sidewalks between the bus station and the courthouse. And that shows you how much regard the petitioner has for pedestrians. The staff report says that more parking will enhance the central business district. There's a huge tradition in the planning profession as a whole, across the nation, of overestimating parking by dramatic leaps and bounds. But apparently we don't even do that here. We don't need to even estimate what the demand is. We just say, oh, we need more. I think a campaign donor asked for it, to be honest. And this all comes down to the mayor. I think he's got his thumb on the scale a little bit. You saw this last year when this petition was brought illegally. The state law was extremely unambiguous that you do not have the ability to waive the requirement that the petitioner has to have the signature of the landowner before they can bring a petition to this body. And yet the mayor sent the lawyer who is supposed to represent the whole city, supposed to represent us as well as you, to lie to you. Now, it's common for lawyers to lie on behalf of their clients, but this is really disrespectful. And it just comes down to we don't need 500 extra spaces. We've got, in the trades district, we already have 500 empty spaces. Downtown, between the 2 downtown garages, we've got 200 empty spaces. They're building a new trades district garage. This is just, it's excessive. We simply don't need this much parking, especially when we have what's being portrayed as a climate emergency, when we have a transportation emergency of pedestrians dying downtown. We need less parking. We need more. We have so much housing downtown. We need to make it more convenient for people that are walking from the housing downtown to the buildings downtown. They shouldn't be crossing traffic that is encouraged just to come to the garage. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Talisha Kopic with Downtown Bloomington, Inc., and we're thrilled to see this project come forward. The 4th Street parking garage kickstarted downtown revitalization in the 1980s by encouraging our private sector investment of historic buildings and small businesses. It quickly became an anchor providing shared parking for multiple users at different times of the day. The office people use it in the early morning, retailers during the daytime, our restaurants at night, entertainments on the evenings and weekends, our churches on Sundays. So it's a really good opportunity to pull a lot of different users together as opposed to, how downtown used to be with a lot of private lots. It's very efficient use of managing a lot of people. We have a much more dense downtown now. We have 89 new buildings that were once private lots. We've got 13,000 employees that live in the downtown, 960 businesses. It makes sense to manage this parking, and super excited to see this new design and ability to get more spaces in it. We agree transportation demand management is an important initiative, and multimodal options must work in tandem with active parking garages. We're a strong regional destination, and people drive cars here until a better option is available. But all of this kind of working together is all part of the puzzle. We want to encourage continued investment and support of a downtown ecosystem. That's the hub of our community, our local businesses, our local attractions, not-for-profits. Bringing people to the downtown is the heart of our community. The garage should maximize this opportunity at this site, and we support the increased number of cars and the height. Obviously appreciate the amenities that have been included with it, and encourage your support of this project. It's timely as well. Customers are starting to make new habits. People who are used to going to the 4th Street garage kind of get frustrated and leave. Our businesses are cringing. It is a very important economic development, cultural tool, social tool. Making downtown clean, safe, convenient is a very important goal. Thank you.
Hi, excuse me. I'm Mary Morgan, representing the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. I want to echo a lot of what Talisha just told you. We support the garage. We're thrilled to have it come forward. We're very concerned about the delay, and so would urge you to support this project tonight, if at all possible. I appreciate Alex's presentation and description of the what this garage means for the future as well as the current business climate downtown. We do support the TDM process and are eager to see the recommendations from that and that be implemented. But right now we're in a transitional period, and at some point in the future, perhaps we will have a city with no parking, but we are not there right now. When we went through this cycle last year, you saw an outpouring from the business community, the downtown business owners, stressing how important this was for their business. So I would just remind you of that. That is still the case. And again, we just urge your support for this project. Thank you very much.
Peter Dorfman, I haven't read the details that I'm sure you have in front of you in the packets that you read to prepare for this meeting this evening. So I'm hoping that maybe during comments, if I missed something, maybe somebody will fill me in. One thing that any building this size has is a lot of roof. And I sat back and waited for details, which I was really hoping to hear about the solar panels. And you may have, again, more detail than I have, but what I learned was that there are going to be solar panels. And I'm a little surprised that neither the applicant nor staff offered any detail beyond that. And I'm a little surprised that that doesn't seem to be a concern for any member of the commission. I would think that any application to the city for any sort of variance, given the concern that everyone in the city feels about our carbon footprint, ought to include a much more detailed and specific proposal as to how much capacity the solar panels on the building are going to contribute to the city's capacity, overall capacity. So I'm hoping for more detail on that. The applicant is asking that the commission approve this and pass it on to the council with a recommendation to approve without that detail, and that it surprises me that the commission would be content to do that. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Timothy Clark. I moved to the city of Bloomington in November of 2018, and I have really grown to love living here. I think it's an incredible place to live. But I just wanted to come and criticize what I think is a faulty assumption that is being made by the city and some of the people who are supporting this garage. I think business owners, and I think the city, and I think a lot of people all have a very strong demand to have access to good transportation downtown, to be able to come, to go, to be able to take part in the city. However, it's not a reasonable thing to say that the only way we can do this is the plan that was presented today. So the decisions that are made by our governments privilege some forms of transit over the other, and the decision made in this room is going to be a huge factor in what type of transit is encouraged, allowed, or excluded in this city. So for me, for example, I live on the west side of the town, and my options are I could walk. It's a 50-minute walk to downtown from where I live, and there are very few sidewalks there are very high speed limits, and there are a lot of cars that sometimes get into accidents with people, which makes me nervous. I could bike, but I have many of the same issues where there are no sidewalks, there are no bike lanes. Sometimes they painted a chyron onto the road, but that's it. And I can drive, and when I drive downtown, I always have a place to park. So while the city is preparing to build 2 other parking garages on top of this one, and they're also asking us to support with our tax dollars this incredibly large expenditure and telling us to think down the road. I think down the road in the next 50 years, this is a commitment to 50 more years of fossil fuel infrastructure. That's what it is, right? And we need to be net zero in the entire country by 2040 or 2050 at absolute latest. And this project is saying, look, 50 years down the road, we still want to be using this garage that commits us to gigantic roads, that commits us to very low efficiency with use, that commits us to damaging our pedestrian infrastructure, damaging our biking infrastructure. I think there are a lot of ways that we can achieve the goals that this parking lot wants to assist. We have a very vitalized downtown, but the thing that actually creates a very vital downtown is a lot of foot traffic, and you don't get nearly as much foot traffic from parking infrastructure and road infrastructure. Protected bike lanes, for example, can sometimes, in some situations, double foot traffic. That's not a joke. You can look that up in a number of studies, which I'm sure are available to the city. Another thing that I think is very, very attainable is fare-free public transit. If we are able to expand our transit to the weekends, if we expand the number of routes and we expand the 15-minute service, we could do all of that for $11 million and make it fare-free. And that eases the burden on other areas that other people who have to drive. So we have all these people who are driving in from outside of the town and they need parking. Well, if people like me can go to downtown in confidence that I'm not going to be run over, that I will have a place to get on a bus and travel and spend money in downtown, then those people will have a place to park. So I would urge everybody here to, as the petitioners have said, consider the next 50 years. And do we want the next 50 years to look like wide roads, car exhaust fume, dodging cars when you're trying to cross streets? Or do we want livable, clean transit infrastructure that every person can use? I think that as the petition itself requires so many exceptions to code, since that's such a big thing that they're asking of everybody to just accept, I think that we really need to be thinking about the next 50 years and what that needs to look like and see if this is what actually fits in our vision. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Hugh Farrell. I'm reading a comment on behalf of Mia Beach, who had to leave a few minutes ago. She sent me some notes while now waiting in a therapist's office. She wanted to explain why she had to leave. I had to take my kid to therapy because her dad was killed while riding his bike in the city last year. That seriously has messed up priorities that make it harder to bike and promote the use of cars by putting up parking garages, even when it claims that the environment and the safety of its residents is a priority. They clearly care more about economic development and bringing more cars right into the center of town than the people they serve if they're filling up the downtown with garages and de-incentivizing modes of transportation like biking, buses, and walking. The communication regarding planning and zoning seems intentionally opaque and difficult to understand. As a resident and property owner who lives in affected areas, we get these notices that give us almost no information. It's been very unclear how we can intervene or be further educated about the structures and plans that the city is building right next to our homes. I'll be very affected by the Building and Trades District parking garage. It will worsen congestion and worsen air pollution. I live in Maple Heights and recently had a substation built next to my home, right next to it. I tried to make my anger about this known to both Duke and the city, but no one cared. Now we have a substation next to our backyard. The Trades District parking garage would also be right next to us. So in addition to the 4th Street parking garage the city is planning, there's also a plan for a Trades District parking garage. It's absurd. It's a poor use of space and doesn't take into account how this impacts the lives of people actually in the neighborhoods that you put these structures in. Communication must be better, and people need to feel like we have a say in what happens in our community. Maple Heights does not need a parking garage. There are already too many parking garage plans in the works. Downtown does not need a parking garage. I know myself and many of the people in our neighborhood are very upset at the continued lack of consideration the city shows us when they put these garages next to our homes. Maybe this was the wrong moment to share this opinion with you, but it's extremely unclear and seems intentionally so how we as affected members of the community in the neighborhoods where you build these big, expensive mega projects can have a voice. Do not build yet another parking garage in our area. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Pearl, and I'm the president of the Bloomington Economic Development Corporation. And actually, I'd love to give a nod to the comments that came just before, because when we talk about economic development, we're talking about quality of life for all members of our community. And I think the things that have been mentioned here earlier are important pieces of that. I've lived in large cities, and being able to walk and cycle and use multimodal transit is important. Parking is also an important piece of that larger puzzle. And something that we wanted to underline is how we're part of a larger picture within our region. Countywide, we have 75,000 individuals that live and work here, and another 16,000 come into our county for work. A garage is part of an economic inclusion plan for those who cannot afford to live downtown or even live in Monroe County. And it's an important part of employment growth. Parking is also an important piece of multimodal plans and a larger vision for downtown. So our organization, as well as others that have been mentioned here, have been participating in a larger study of how we can help people in multimodal ways access the amazing things that we have in the center of our community here. This is going to fit within larger plans for development, and it'll be physically scaled for what's to come. It enhances and it complements increasing density in our downtown, and the centralized footprint uses less land than a greater number of surface lots that you have scattered across the community. And we would really like to underscore that we're not just talking about downtown Bloomington, we're talking about Monroe County and beyond. The Bloomington MSA actually includes Owen and Greene County. That's about 168,000 individuals. These individuals are already traveling into our community. So having a place for them to be based and then be able to walk once they get here is an important piece of the puzzle. We do have the 1.5 million visitors to downtown that were mentioned earlier as well. So this will provide access to those of us that do business downtown but are based outside of downtown, and it's really part of the larger picture. We already have increasing density due to housing in the downtown area, the Trades District, the Beeline and connection to Switchyard Park, as well as the IU Health Bloomington Regional Academic Health Center. Even though that's not downtown, you have visitors coming from all over South Central Indiana to our community, so giving them a place to come while they're here is important. As I-69 builds out, and as we have greater connections with Indianapolis and connections south to NSWC Crane as it grows, these are also important parts of the picture. So I'd like to underscore, as we talk about economic development and as we talk about quality of life, this is part of a larger picture. And we at the Bloomington Economic Development Corporation really are open to and welcome further conversation as we move forward in how we can grow our community for the future. This is really looking towards not what we are now, but where we are growing as a community and how we can include everyone in that picture for the future. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, my name is Alicia, and I'm Alicia Krupp. Excuse me. I'm here speaking for the Wonder Lab Museum, or on behalf of the Wonder Lab Museum. And we've always been in support of a new, safer, larger parking facility. It does serve our visitors well, and we are in support of this plan. I wanted to mention that we are part of what Jen was talking about with our outside visitors. We welcome around 80 to 85,000 visitors a year annually, and we expect that to grow to about 100 because we just opened a brand new area for the smallest scientists, so people with babies. The parking garage on 4th Street is the closest, safest access for families traveling with strollers, wheelchairs, grandparents. Most of our visitors who come from out of town, which is about 40% of our annual traffic, do come from outside of Monroe County. They need a safe place to park, and they travel with multiple people in one car, so it's not just single-use spaces. So we are in support of that plan, with the caveat that there's a safe way to cross, and those families can get over to our facility and access other things. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Morning Wilder. I'm wondering if you can pull up one of the slides from before. It was just a list of the amenities that the parking garage is set to offer. It was towards the beginning. Yes, I believe so. So I just want to take a look at these things. So this is basically just describing a parking garage. There is nothing special about dedicated carpool parking. There's nothing special about bike parking. Bicyclists don't often park in garages because there are places closer to where they're going where there are bike racks. Most garages have compact vehicle spaces. Most places have public restrooms. Most places have all these different things. So there's nothing special about this particular thing. The only one thing is that they want to do Park Smart sustainability certification, which is just a way to whitewash this sepulcher. It's nice there's public art. I think that we could spend $385,000 on public art without building a structure. I know it was 1% from the fund, but building a structure and justifying it with public art is ludicrous. I also want to say that I don't know if you've been downtown or if you walked around the courthouse or down Kirkwood. The least pleasant thing about walking around is the traffic. Diesel vehicles. Indiana, of course, doesn't have any emission standards, so there are lots of polluting cars. There are lots of people who speed. There are lots of things that make downtown great, and driving is one of the things that really detracts from that. As Mr. Alexander commented earlier, there is adequate parking currently, and in such a small city, it's not a big deal for people who are able to walk from existing parking places to their destination. I also wanted to comment on the piece of the art. You're talking about the aluminum being sustainable and creating less waste. I think that's great. I also think that building the structure would completely set that off. Like, it doesn't really matter so much if there is some wasted aluminum versus all of the 75% of the, even though 75% of the materials are coming from local sources, that's still an enormous amount of natural resources that are being extracted. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cody Roach. It's sort of a trope in every place I've lived that local businesses are always paranoid that if there isn't just massive amounts of parking so that anyone coming from out of town can sneeze and just find it, that there just isn't enough and we need to spend lots and lots of money to get more. But really, from what it sounds like, and from living here, it seems like that we do have enough parking already, and maybe not enough signage for out-of-towners to get there very easily, but I've never had a problem parking in town. There's this laundry list of things that make it sustainable and all this window dressing and stuff, but we are having more fossil fuel infrastructure. Seems very much the opposite of the way we need to be going, and also seems to bring this risk with it that I haven't heard anyone I've heard little bits talk about, of making downtown just like more unpleasant place to be, which really seems like the crux of things. The more pleasant it is just to walk downtown, and transportation is an important part of that, the more it seems there will have good foot traffic and the kinds of conditions that actually are beneficial to businesses and for living here. I really hope you guys, strike down this laundry list of variances they're asking you for. It just doesn't seem the right way. Thank you.
Hi, Isabel Piedmont Smith, City Council District 5. I wanted to kind of make two types of comments, and I'm sorry, they're going to be kind of interspersed, but I want you to keep in mind that one type is more that we shouldn't be supporting fossil fuel use. In 2020, when we are 30 short years away from when we need to be at net zero to save the planet, we shouldn't be investing in parking garages. The other kind of argument is that this is a bigger garage than we need and than we expected. Okay, so first of all, our comprehensive plan, goal 6.4, says we need to prioritize non-automotive modes of transportation. This is obviously not doing that. It is mainly for cars. It is the huge size it is because we're trying to fit as many cars in there as possible. Another point, the City Council, about a year ago, or beginning of April of 2019, did approve funding for this garage with the understanding it would be 6 stories. Alex Crowley at that time said it would be about 78 feet, and now we're looking at 90-some feet. So that was not the understanding when the City Council approved funding for this garage. It was a shock to me to see that the number of spaces that have been accommodated in the smaller footprint is actually higher than what was brought to you last fall with the bigger footprint. Why? We had an expectation of height. They made it higher to add more spaces than what we expected or that we had previously. It doesn't make any sense to me. We don't need that many more spaces. We had 352. We're going now to 550 something. If we go to 510, if we go to even 500, we could stay within the 6 stories, which was our understanding when we approved the bonds for this issue. I would like to know, I would appreciate if somebody could ask afterwards, I know you're not going to answer me now, but how much of the new facility is going to be convertible space? Because that was also an important issue we discussed at the City Council, that, you know, if in the future there's going to be less people driving individually, can we convert some of that space to residential or commercial or other uses? Another question I hope that one of you might take up, and it's been asked by another member of the public, is how many kilowatt hours of solar can we expect to see generated from the solar panels here? It was our understanding when we approved the bond that it would be 12,000 kilowatts. If there's been some argument that we don't need that much parking, I understand that, I understand the perspective that downtown business needs some parking. My argument is that we don't need 7 stories of it. It was interesting that Mr. Crowley showed the map of the projected expansion of the convention center with the big orange rectangle, which conveniently was labeled off the side of the page so you couldn't see what the label said, but that's a parking garage. So directly to the west of the current convention center is proposed another parking garage. So I just want you to keep that in mind, that there is another parking garage planned. This garage is not with the intention of serving the convention center. The green alley idea from the Environmental Commission, I think, is a great idea. Could be an excellent improvement for the alley that is to the west of the garage. I should say west, not east. I already clarified that with Ms. Scanlon. So I urge you to add that to the conditions for approval. Finally, I've served on this body, and I've served on the City Council, and I stand by our planning documents. And what are we saying to private developers when the city itself is asking for so many exceptions to our own rules? I mean, the height is one thing, but we're asking about, they're asking an exception for driveway width. They're asking an exception for several other things. If I was them, I would try to meet my own rules of the City of Bloomington as closely as possible. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. I'm Ron Walker. I'm Vice President of Operations for CFC Properties. We're a Cook Group company, and we own and manage many commercial buildings in downtown Bloomington, all of them old, many of them historic. And they were renovated and repurposed by someone who started their business here, and that's what they serve in this community, is a space for businesses to start and grow and people to work. We support access to downtown for that purpose. We also support this garage for what it provides for those businesses. And I want to focus a little bit on Fountain Square in this case. As you've heard, the 4th Street Garage was built somewhat in partnership with Fountain Square to help downtown be successful. Fountain Square is both an events venue, a place for basic sector employers, and a retail location. The events venue is Fountain Square Ballroom, and hopefully you've all had a chance to attend an event there. We've noticed more challenge in leasing that ballroom since the garage was demolished. And that is because, think of the kind of events that you go to the ballroom: weddings, family reunions, receptions. Often those are multi-generational attendees, and downtown is a challenge for folks. It's something they ask us every time they're looking at the ballroom. So that's important, and we've seen that. The others are employers, basic sector employers, people who come into downtown Bloomington typically Monday through Friday and need a place. We've worked with many of them on the issue of how they get to the downtown Bloomington. Almost all have to drive, maybe not every day of the year, but most of the time. Almost all of them have to drive. And they are hungry for this garage to be reconstructed and to be bigger. If we have an employer leave, the permits are gobbled up instantly. They're not out there waiting to be leased. There is growth, pent-up growth in downtown, and we're doing all we can to meet that need. And we've had to adapt to individual requests for folks because the garage is not connected. People who might have had surgery or broken an ankle, and can we give them something that we own privately that might be used for a security officer or a maintenance technician or a delivery? And we try to honor that when we can to help get them through that challenge. But it has been a challenge for many of these employers. The last would be retail. And as I was sitting tonight, I was thinking about the south side of the square at Fountain Square and thinking, that's the only side of the square right now that is pure retail. It has not converted to mostly restaurant and bars like the other sides have. And I like those establishments. I think we all try to frequent them when we can, but we're the side that's retail. And it is a struggle for retailers. I think we all know that. The difference is it's not the same for all of them. None of them would say, this is great. The garage hasn't affected us. I don't think they would say that. Some adapt better, and I think it has to do with their market, the type of customer that they have. Others have had more challenge, and I think they might have older clientele. Maybe there are access issues with parking, and we know of many cases spoken to us by our tenants of where customers drive around a few times, they don't find it, they become impatient and they leave. They probably could have found something within a few blocks, but that's not what they chose to do. These problems didn't exist to that level when the garage was in operation and connected to Fountain Square. So that's something, we want to keep that diversity in retail going. We want to keep that alive downtown, and we want there to be different types of establishments that help enable and invite different types of people to come downtown. So we ask for you to support this petition tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ajon Rose. I'm the current chair of the Chamber's Advocacy Committee, as well as a longtime supporter and participant in the arts. I echo what Ron just said in terms of the business community, and we hear this regularly from our chamber members of the importance of the ability to park for all the reasons that Ron stated. What's more important to me, I think, at this point, is the evenings and the cultural aspect of downtown Bloomington. We have a lot, we're blessed in Bloomington with a huge number of arts organizations and theater organizations, et cetera. They work very hard to build their audiences. There's not enough people within the city of Bloomington to support all those organizations, yet their diversity is so important to the quality of life that we have. And they've worked very hard to bring, as was stated by the person from WonderLab, worked very hard to bring in people from very far away. They need a place to park and they need access. And once they're here, they're walking. They're not driving from the 4th Street garage to the north side of the square. So I encourage you to support this proposal. Thank you.
My name is Galen Cassidy. I'm in support of this. As a representative of the Uptown Cafe and a downtown business, I can tell you I interact with both guests that join us for a dining experience and our employees, which consist of over 100 at the moment. The struggles of parking downtown are very real, and it's a definite need. I'm constantly interacting with these people on a day-to-day basis multiple times, and this is the first thing that gets brought up. So definitely in support of this, and I'd just like to consider or encourage everyone that's involved in this project to consider those downtown employees when you're working on this. I think affordable parking options are definitely a need right now. We've seen very recently in the lot just behind our establishment a 100% rate increase, which has become quite a hindrance with our staff and other downtown employee members. So I would definitely encourage all those involved to consider these affordable options, consider annual passes that make downtown employees able to work and maintain and sustain the growth we're seeing in downtown Bloomington. I do believe more downtown parking is needed because our employees are coming from all over. I think it's unrealistic to ask them, especially these employees living in rural areas, to rely solely on biking, buses, or other modes of transportation. While I agree we need to think about sustainability, sometimes it's just not realistic for some of these employees at the moment. The parking restrictions we've seen are a serious struggle for downtown businesses, both with our guests and employees. And I just, again, want to encourage the committee to support this project because the growth we're seeing in downtown Bloomington is needed. And I think, the amount of driving that's going around, someone mentioned before that is a hindrance when you're walking downtown in Bloomington. But having a parking garage with this amount of space, I think will stop that, or at least see an improvement there, so that we're not seeing cars just going around the blocks multiple times. I do think that this project and consideration is much needed, and I thank you for your consideration and support here.
Good evening, and thank you for your time and interest in this project. We very much appreciate it. I'm Jim Murphy, president of CFC Properties, but also I want you to know that I'm involved with Downtown Bloomington, Inc. I sit on the board of directors at the Convention Center, and I was on the steering committee for the Convention Center expansion project. And I say that only so you would understand that I'm here not only representing CFC, but I was influenced by those other boards, committees, commissions that I've had a pleasure to sit on. I appreciate Alex's photograph of the 1986 downtown, because it reminded me of a few things. One, of what the condition of downtown was back then, which very few in this room knows what it was back then. Also, it reminds me of partnerships that was created between CFC Cook, the City of Bloomington, Downtown Bloomington, Inc., the Chamber of Commerce, Economic Development Corporation, but probably most importantly, the downtown business community, because that's who this is really all about. And know that the downtown business community is largely made up of individual small business owners. And parking is important. It was important in 1986. One thing I noticed on that photograph was the Graham Hotel, the tall Graham Hotel, and the Register parking garage, a 2-level parking garage. That was there because Bill Cook and Mayor Mikowski's agreement to work together as a partnership, that Cook would buy and restore the Graham if the city would build parking. And they both did, and it has been a success. And that's what has speared the economic vitality and rebirth of downtown Bloomington as we know what it is today. I mentioned the downtown businesses. One thing that I'm reminded of is, as you know, the garage was closed January 1st of last year. So it's now been closed since demolished for 14 months, and the clock is running. These downtown businesses struggle to survive. They really do. The arts, the entertainment, the restaurants, as you just heard, really struggle to survive. I will give kudos to the city. They did come to CFC, I'm sure others, and they talked to us about how could they help accommodate us during this time. CFC has 250 parking spaces or our tenants combined in this parking garage, and they had to be relocated elsewhere. But it's put a real strain and stress and hardship on them. Another thing I wanted to mention too is that this is about the future. I know Isabel made a comment about it had nothing to do with the convention center. It absolutely does have something to do with the convention center. And that's why I stated earlier the organization I was involved with, because I know that this parking garage will impact the future viability of the convention center in its current, but also hopefully expanded state if and when that does occur. It's extremely important for that. So this proposal has been vetted by planning staff. They've given you recommendations. You certainly have vetted it, as you are doing currently. The Environmental Commission has. It's been in front of the arts, and they've done a great job with that. And I ask you to approve this petition as it's been presented to you, and thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Mark Stossberg. I work in the field of transportation demand management, and I just want to remind the Plan Commission that just a week ago, we had Bloomington paid about $150,000 for a transportation demand management study, the results of which were presented to council last week. So we've talked some about what modes people take and what their likelihood were to take, but we hired consultants to find out the details of this information. I think about 1,000 people were surveyed. One of the questions was about what would you do if driving were less viable? 55% respondents said they would bike to work. 69% said they would consider carpooling. So this transportation demand management business isn't about zero driving, zero parking. It's about finding the right size. And what this guidance has provided to the city is this is a study that's concluded, and now there's a recommendation to launch programs to manage the demand. It's solving the parking problem, but just from the other side. And when we do that well, it affects the optimal size. And we're talking about a 50-year plan for this parking garage, and we're also for this parking garage and the other one, we're spending about $50 million. It's a big fiscal load for the city, so it's financially responsible to choose the right size of a garage. The earlier transportation consultants we hired recommended that before we pay for new garages, we do this transportation demand management so we could potentially reduce that demand before we enhance the supply, so we could do the right size. Now we're doing the same processes in parallel, so we have to make some guesses about what the right size is. I think we can do better than the 550 spots that we have, and the right size will end up being lower. And I recommend a site plan be approved that is more in line with our building height ordinances and is a smaller number of spaces on the same lot. I think it's a fiscal responsible plan. It's also in line with our climate goals and the advice we're receiving from experts about how we can manage our transportation demand effectively. Thank you.
So I know it's a little atypical of me to come back up here, but there were a couple things that were mentioned that sort of depended on the historical record, and I thought, especially as I was named, I don't know if there's an opportunity to address
I think you
them.
had maybe a few minutes left, but,
Actually, they don't have any time left.
oh.
So it would have to be, once
Yeah.
you guys do questions,
Yeah.
if you have a question
So,
for him.
yeah, we'll try to get some of those questions
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
redirected. Before we do that, is there anyone else from the public who wanted to make a comment tonight? Okay, thank you. So we are now back to the commission for additional questions or comments or a motion. We'll start on my right. Any questions, additional questions or comments?
Would be about the solar panels, if we could have more details about that part.
So when we originally forecasted what we could accomplish, it was based on a combination of what we saw as usage at other garages and what we thought we could put up here. Our commitment to this is to put the maximum number of panels up that we can, given certain limitations, and the limitations are in part Duke and what they will allow us to do. So you can't massively over engineer solar panels beyond your own needs. So what we're going to do is we're going to maximize the panels, and we're going to we have the ability to do so because we have a number of panels left from our guaranteed energy savings contract that we can apply. So there's no real cost issue. The only limitation that we'll see is what Duke allows us to do. There's going to be the energy consumed by the garage itself, and then there'll be energy consumed by the spaces that are down on the ground floor, each of which we will be looking to sub-meter potentially so that we can, again, maximize the solar. But right now, we have to just engineer it out based on the new footprint and make sure we can figure out what that number looks like.
No questions, but comments. Are we doing both?
Sure.
I too served on the Bloomington City Council when this plan first originated, and we thought we were going to have the larger footprint in which to build and design. I also served on the technical committee that helped review the project as it came through, and I was extremely impressed by all the ability for the architects and the planners to be able to accommodate the many, and I do repeat, many requirements that the City Council placed on this project. My position is fairly simple at this point. When the facts on the ground change, so do our designs. And it's as simple as that. We may want the absolute state-of-the-art, gold quality lead design we can get, but unfortunately, we are now faced with the smaller footprint. And so we're going to have to get as much as we had originally wanted from the project as possible without compromising, and it is clear to me, the need for parking in an upward fashion in the downtown for so many of the reasons that people very compellingly spoke to tonight. We need a comprehensive travel and transportation plan, but this idea that we can fix our transportation first and keep everybody from using their cars is, to me, completely unrealistic. We have got to have the parking accommodations for the employees. The case was made that these are not wealthy people who can afford to keep paying higher and higher prices for parking. These are our bread and butter, salt of the earth people that are keeping our stores and our restaurants and our downtown viable. They need places to park, especially those that are not living nearby, who cannot afford housing in the near downtown, who are driving in to support the vitality of our downtown. As I partake in the arts, which I do quite frequently, I see many of the audiences at Cardinal Stage Productions. They are not younger people. The people who support our theaters and our downtown destinations for the arts are older. I actually was at the theater not too long ago, and a lot of older couples were like panting and really struggling because they had to park a lot farther away than they normally do when they have the option to park right across the street in 4th Street. So if we think we are not doing anything negative to our economy and the vitality of our downtown by being extremely short-sighted about the versatility and the diverse nature of the people who live, work, maintain the vitality of our downtown, we're being a little bit, well, short-sighted doesn't begin to explain it. We need this garage. It's not a new garage. It's a replacement garage. And as the case has been made, we've been without it for 14 months now, and it is hurting. It is hurting people who we need to think about and who don't often come to these meetings, but I hear from them every day. So that's my comment at this point. I may have other questions as we have other rounds, but I'm not concerned about the height. I'm not concerned about some sort of double standard that we don't hold to other developers. This is a garage. This is not a, this is not a housing project. This is a garage. And we need to be thinking about, rather than going out, we go up. And if that's what we need in order to accommodate the numbers of spots that our chamber, the BEDC, our merchants, our restaurant owners are telling us we need, I don't have a problem with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question that I think we need to raise based on some comments, and I hope we can frame this as a question. The first one that I heard posed was about the integration or the connection between this garage and the prospective convention center work. And I know a lot of that is speculative, and Jim Murphy commented on it, but I wonder if we can at least talk a little bit about the big orange thing that was in that image, and if it truly is a parking garage, and kind of what's the thinking right now on really planning for both of those projects. It seems to me that this garage that we're talking about tonight is close enough to be useful to the convention center, but I'd like to know what the thinking is on that at least.
Yeah, so Alex Crowley, Economic Development and Sustainable Development. So a couple things. One is I'm certain that was not, that the implication of my cutting that off was not intended to be something that I did on purpose. I think the way to think of the two garages is as follows. There is a parking need that serves employees in ever-growing companies. Envisage is exploding. All of the downtown square actually has a number of small companies in there. Those are growing. There's a lot of economic activity. There's a lot of arts and cultural activity going on. So even if there were no convention center, there is a need for parking for people coming in from out of town, for people who are in town and can't ride their bike. So there's an embedded need, and we think of the garage here as serving that. One cannot have a significant convention center without having parking. I mean, it just as much as we'd love to think that people are going to bus to Bloomington to go to a convention or get here in other ways than driving, some will. Many people will drive to conventions. And so, I think the way to think of the convention center garage is that it is serving a very specific need, and that is thousands of people, hopefully, coming into town to avail themselves of the convention center, which has its own requirements and its own infrastructure needs. And so, there will be some interchange between the two. One can help cover the overflow. There will be a hotel potentially, right there across the street. So there's a way in which the garage can help to gather more from the convention center. But really, they're almost two very different needs, and certainly to think that the 4th Street garage can serve the needs of the convention center is just not tenable.
Mm-hmm. And then I also think it's important that we address the other question that was raised about potential convertibility of this space. Should, the reality that we really do address our greater transportation needs and develop better free fare buses and really do some things to change how we get ourselves around, what's the potential convertibility? I mean,
So there was an early discussion about that. Early on, there's a question. We were very interested in the potential. We'd seen some articles that this was a concept that might be worth considering. I think as part of the technical review process and certainly discussed in meetings subsequent, especially as we were sort of finalizing the Trades District garage, it became clear, speaking to the experts, that unless you convert within a handful of years, so convertibility makes sense if you know you're going to take 2 floors and you're almost immediately going to turn them into offices or something like that. It's a sort of like a stair-step approach. Then convertibility makes sense. The return on investment for convertibility, if you don't do that, if you're sort of betting on some distant, future where you want to start to convert floors, it just doesn't make sense economically. So, love the idea, theoretically. This is not one of those situations where we know right away we're going to convert into something else. And so given that and given the economics of it, it just didn't make sense to do.
Thank you.
Oh. I mean, there is a convertibility to the parking spaces and the expansion of electric vehicle infrastructure, but I think the reference was to because as you know, the floors have to be taller if you want to convert them to something else.
Yeah, but the inclusion of more electric vehicle accommodations could easily be made.
Yeah, that will be made because we
Yeah.
will run conduit throughout to be able to accommodate that.
Thanks. I have other comments, but I don't know if we're...
Save your comments?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments to my left?
I think an important note for me was that what the gentleman with CFC mentioned about there had been 250 parking spaces in the previous garage. Obviously, those have been displaced. Coming into this, I'm thinking more of the influx of visitors, but we have that, but we also have these, current employees that, need a place to park, an affordable place to park. So that made an impression on me.
On the convertibility for electric cars, do you mean you're going to wrap the building around in conduit and then eventually we can turn every space into electrical car space? I mean, is that possible? Is that even an idea?
Yeah, so what we will do is we will put in chargers, 10 chargers, I think, right at the get-go. And so those will be hardwired, the equipment will be bought and installed and ready to go. The remainder of the garage will be built with conduit already built into it, so that at any time that we want to add 10, 20, 200 chargers, it's a lot easier to do because now the wiring infrastructure is in place. All you have to do is run the wiring to the new electric vehicle chargers. So we will not, because right now the demand in Indiana, at least what we've seen on our current parking garages, doesn't suggest that we should build out a tremendous amount of somewhat expensive charging stations. What we do want to do is avoid the cost down the road of having to come back and somehow retrofit, wiring that hasn't been anticipated into a garage structure. So we'll do half
Does that wire support, I mean, the wiring, would that support potentially, in a beautiful world, everybody has an electric car, and now you have 533 spaces.
Every space could have a charger in front of it. The conduit will be there, so the
Correct.
and we'll just have to run
do you have to have substations? Do you have, I mean, it's,
yeah,
we're talking about a lot of power here.
Yeah, yeah. And so we will, need to sort of do it out in chunks and build out the meter sizes and solar actually to be able to grow with the demand as it comes. And we're hoping it comes sooner rather than later.
Do you have any renderings on the solar panels?
Do we have renderings on the solar panels?
We have a footprint that shows it in the center of it, like that, but it's nothing it's just a square, it shows a beam.
Yeah, so we don't have a graphic rendering of it. It'll be canopied solar on, kind of like what we see across the street here, where you have, and it'll run basically along the middle center of the roof.
Are we doing statements as well? Questions?
If you prefer, I can come back to you for a final comment if you just want to stick to questions now, or feel free to make a comment as well if you like.
I think I'm just going ahead and make my comment. I am, there's several things I heard tonight. I would love to have the garage looking into the future. That's why I'm asking those questions about electrical cars and solar panels and making it. I'm also very interested in the green alley. I think that would be a very good idea. I do see, I work with a lot of people. I talk to a lot of people, and I know that the workers downtown are coming from outside Monroe County or outskirts of Monroe County. They are driving in. So this garage is very important for the vitality of the business downtown, of the people that are working downtown and getting paid not so big wages to serve in the restaurants and in retail in different places. So when Jennifer talked about inclusivity, we talked about being inclusive all the time. This is one way to be inclusive with people that don't not have the means or the way to get downtown to work. I also agree, thinking, there's 253 spaces that are missing for workers. Do you have any partnership? I mean, are they going to have an annual pass that will cut the cost for them to park downtown to work? Is there any program that we even talk about on the garage? I guess that's a question.
As it stands right now, parking rates are set by council, so you can buy a monthly pass, so you're not paying every single day.
Sure.
But we have not, to this point, looked at targeting programs, although there was a local income tax forum that happened last week at the Mill, and this was an idea that was raised, the question of how to target very specific programs to people who would benefit, and could there be some sort of income-based discounting on certain critical services. Parking could be one, transit could be one, whatever it would happen to be. But we haven't really delved into that in a lot of detail.
I guess I recommend that would be something to be talked about for downtown workers that make less than a certain amount of income a year. I do agree with my colleague. This is a replacement garage. This is not a new garage. We're not talking about building something. I mean, it will be a new structure, and yes, we are increasing the amount of parking. But this is a replacement garage, and there are many businesses, Wonderlab, Buskirk Chimley. You can go Waldron Center. I've been to a Friday night arts at Waldron Center, and there's no place to park. So anyway, in conclusion, I am in favor of this, of the garage, and I am in favor in voting. The only question that I have is, why are we not going to follow procedure, which is 2 meetings with Plan Commission before it goes to council? So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other?
Yeah, I can answer that question. So this is not a 2-hearing petition. This is a 1-hearing petition. Site plans are 1 hearing because this is it. This is not going to council. If it was part of a plan unit development, then it would be. You're welcome.
Clarify. Thank you.
I have one
And I'll save my comments. It's really for planning staff. Just a clarification. On the comment made in our packet that this does not meet the architectural standards of the downtown character overlay because it doesn't allow cement block, but this will be concealed with the treatment with urban fabric as shown as part of this development in number 6, the condition number 6 that you listed. So the thing is, when you go to page 65, I'm not sure what as shown means. So in our packet, page 65 in our packet shows the dark wall, the concrete that's dark and the concrete that's light. And the one that's light, it definitely really doesn't conceal it. So if the objective is to conceal it, it seems that that condition maybe could be a little more specific, that it should be concealed with dark concrete and then the fabric overlay.
Yes, I think that's fine. So what we have seen from the petitioner group is that there were still maybe 2 options, but yes, one does seem better to meet those goals of covering the cement, and I believe that's what's in these images here. And then the other image was when they were going back and forth between the 2 examples, but Mr. Starwitz could maybe confirm, and also, yes, this body could amend the condition to include which one you think would be preferable.
Okay, so I might be interested in that because it's not clear that if that's the objective, which is a great objective to have, that it probably needs to be a little more specific.
Sure.
Because it doesn't appear on page 65 to really cover the concrete. You can just totally see it, so otherwise I'm very much in favor of it.
Alex, could you speak a little bit to the issue raised by the gentleman who was talking about the recent transportation management study? Sorry, I don't recall your name. But the upshot seems to be between, I think, those comments and some of the comments by Mr. Alexander and the data that he provided is why this many spaces does it need to be this big? And can you talk a little bit about your thinking about the results of that study? I will say that self-reported data, I understand that there can be limitations with self-reported data, particularly in the literature, when you see people aspirationally saying that they will do things in larger numbers environmentally than they sometimes do. But I don't know that that's a flaw of this study, and I'm not meaning to suggest it. But I'm just trying to get a better handle on the why this many spaces if the plan is to try to at least encourage a decrease in driving overall. I think it's a very fair point that we have a lot of people in the city of Bloomington for whom biking to various events and walking long distances is not realistic. And so I appreciate that, and I think that for reasons mentioned by a number of other people, the garage is needed, parking is needed to support employees in an affordable parking way, to support downtown businesses. But I would like to get a better handle of, what was the algorithm, if you will, about this many spaces and needing it to be quite that big, particularly since, as you noted, convertibility is not a realistic option if things go in a different direction, other than to convert to electric vehicles, which is not insignificant, but it is not everything. So,
yeah, it's a great question. So, first of all, we're very excited and happy to have completed the transportation demand management study, because I think that really helps us to make smart investments about the future and figure out, how to incentivize people. They talked a little bit about the carrot and the stick, but we really want to try to carrotize people into thinking new patterns of commuting and movement. So we're very excited about that. There's a lot of great information in there. How you rationalize that with the apparent contradiction of a substantial garage, I alluded to it earlier, is, I think while this, as it's built, brings net gain from the previous garage, ultimately, think of it not as a net gain play. Think of it as a play that allows for the reuse of less useful parking capacity. So the lot that's sitting across the street from the Buzzkirk is a parking lot right now, right? It's a banking parking lot. It'll be a building. The lot that is currently where the surface lots outside of the convention center, that's going to be a convention center and a hotel. I mean, that's going away, right? So it's if you think, and the possibilities are sort of endless. If you think of the lot that's behind the Buzzkirk, the surface lot that the city has behind the Buzzkirk, well, just imagine if we could convert that, remove that capacity. Imagine what you could do with the Buzzkirk, or imagine what you could put there instead. So there are a lot of plays that can happen as you consolidate. So I don't think of it as being, hey, do we want to maximize parking? What we want to do is provide convenient and efficient parking. It will go in, and in the short term, it'll increase the parking. But as time goes on, and one of the things about the transportation demand management plan is that it's going to take a couple of years for it even to sort of get going, much less have a significant effect on patterns. So I believe, and I'm doing this from memory, but I think that the objective in the first couple of years is to drop by 3 points from 63 to 60 the single occupancy vehicle, right? So just to give you a sense of this is going to take a while, right? This is transportation demand management takes a while to get done, but as it's happening, we are able to then look around at some of this inefficient surface stuff that's going on, and with land being at a premium and density being something that we're trying to accomplish so more people can walk out and walk around from their house, then you're able to do that more effectively while consolidating parking into a more centralized structure. So that's how we think about what seems to be this weird, weird contradiction. But actually, I think it makes sense over the long term because it does allow you to accomplish both.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I had one question. I just want to drill a little deeper on this question of solar, because I was really surprised by something you said earlier, which was that you were waiting to see what Duke would allow you to do. And I'm really curious as to what authority Duke has over the city's ability to install solar panels.
Well, so I mean, you can put in as much as you want. What you need to do is, if you want to have net metering, in other words, you want to have a bidirectional meter, they get involved. And it's in their interest to obviously to minimize the inflow back into the network. And
so the limit is just on how much power you can put back into the grid, not how much you can capture on the site. Is that correct?
Yeah, and so we'll maximize it. So we'll do whatever we can to get as close to usage demand and we've had these discussions with the capability, in fact, of growing it, because as EV stations come in, that's actually going to have a bigger power demand. So we're already starting to think all right, well, this is what you come out of the gate with. How can you build on that over time and extend it as demand actually grows in the building? Not because we're hoping people just consume more electricity, but we're hoping that they convert over to things like EV. So you can over-engineer it, but that doesn't really make a lot of sense. You engineer it to maximize and to try to make your structure, balance out. You can't over-engineer it and pump it back into the system. That's where Duke comes in. Right. But you can be thoughtful about how you think about placement and future placement, so that as your demand grows, potentially you have the ability to actually meet that demand from a solar perspective.
But in theory, if we had on-site storage, battery banks, we could be capturing solar, filling battery banks, and powering electric vehicles on site without Duke's permission.
Yeah, and storage is, we're sort of right on the, storage is coming, it's almost there, but it's just barely not there. It is, but it's just not tenable yet. So we're trying to anticipate stuff like that for the future, certainly.
Great, thanks. Any other questions before we move to our final comment? Okay. Would anyone like to put a motion on the table before we go to our final comments here? The staff's recommendation is to forward to council with a positive recommendation and 9 conditions of approval as spelled out in the packet.
This one is recommending
I'm
approval.
sorry.
That's okay.
Yes, is for approval. I was thinking back to our previous one. The staff recommendation is for approval of this with the 9 conditions as laid out in the packet. Would someone like to make a motion and perhaps, I know you had one change you'd like to make to one of those conditions, so would you like to try to state that?
Sure. So I would move approval of SP-04-20 with the 9 conditions. However, I would amend condition number 6 to say that the treatment with the art installation would be achieved with dark crash walls. Does that work? Does that make sense? Yeah?
Was there one of the renderings in the packet that showed?
Page 65 shows the 2 options of that.
And there's, we don't really have a label that we can reference there, I suppose. So is that sufficiently clear to staff? Yeah, we could say the preferred dark concrete crash walls as shown on page 65 of the packet.
Right.
So you're talking about the, like the top image as opposed to the bottom image on this page?
Because they're very, very evident, in my opinion, on the bottom.
Yeah, that's fine with us. I mean, that's clear enough, I think, for us.
Okay.
And then also, we had put in the packet to please amend the condition 1 to include the variance requirement for parking space width. If you guys want, they'll need that as well. So number 1 says approval is contingent upon approval of variances by the Board of Zoning Appeals related to entrance drives as listed in this report, but it should say and also parking space width.
Parking space is just to be in.
Because current code
to be
requires
currently-
9,
Yeah.
Okay, so you want that, so we want condition 1 to say, the approval is contingent upon approval of the variances by the Board of Zoning Appeals related to entrances and drives and parking space width,
Sure, yes,
as listed in this report.
correct.
Okay.
So I would add that to my motion as well.
Thank you.
One last
Sorry about that.
friendly correction, though. The alley is on the west side of the site, so correcting that in number 5, just for clarity.
So I'll add that as well to that motion.
Okay. So let me try to just state this one more time, just make sure we have it right. So the motion is to approve SP 04-20 with the 9 conditions of approval as stated in the packet with the following changes. Number 1 will be amended to include parking space width. Number 5 will be amended to say the alley west of the site. And number 6 will be amended to say installation of urban fabric with the dark crash walls as shown in page 65 of the packet. Is that right?
That's
All
right.
Do we have a second for that motion?
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Let's go to our final comments on this, and we'll start down here on my left.
I came to this community in the fall, and what impressed me coming from out of state was the vibrancy of the downtown. I drive around, and I actually couldn't find a parking space, which was quite surprising to me, and I circled around again, and then actually ended up coming over to the city lot and then just walked where I needed to, which was fine too. But there's a lot of vibrancy with downtown. I think there is some need for the parking. As folks have mentioned, it's a replacement garage. It's not a new garage. When I look at the old garage, this is aesthetically a lot better looking than the old garage. So I support this project.
Yes.
Just one final statement that Bloomington is a vibrant place, and we also have a unique situation, which is during specific times of the year, the town gets inflated beyond what we can accommodate. I think this will help to a certain extent. And I also, with the new hospital being built, soon we will become a regional center for this southern Indiana as people come up to treat their patients for treatment. And I am very interested in helping the workers downtown, people that work, that need a place to park, and they are going to come from Owen County and Greene County and outside Monroe County, and they need a place to park their car, and it needs to be affordable for them. So thank you.
I support this project. I do remember Bloomington of 1985 and of 1982, when it was actually even worse. So I greatly appreciate what downtown Bloomington is like now. I do agree there are out-of-town visitors, thankfully, really, to our city for all of our incredible amenities and for jobs. As you've stated, they need to be able to park. I don't think art is a justification. I think need is a justification, and there's definitely a need. The art is just an amazing, wonderful addition to a parking garage, because I don't really think the other parking garages we have are very attractive. So this is very refreshing, and I applaud staff for coming up with such a great solution. Small businesses that we all enjoy are not run for public benefit. They are run for profit, and the only way for businesses to have a profit and exist is to have customers that can get to them, and people who can work and support those businesses. There are a lot of cars right now circling downtown because they don't have places to park because the garage is gone. And on busy nights, when our downtown is vibrant, it actually is dangerous because cars can't just get right in, put the car in the garage, and then they can walk to wherever. They are circling and circling, and sadly causing injury to pedestrians. So this garage really, the lack of the current garage shows how bad it is actually for pedestrians. I believe this will improve pedestrian safety because they will just come to one spot and leave the car and go. So those are my comments, and I am in favor of this.
I support this project too. I endorse all of the comments that have been previously made and the comments that I made earlier, and so I really don't have anything else to add. Thank you.
All right.
Right. In this first meeting, since I'm the newbie, I will abstain because hearing both sides, I am not inclined to vote in favor or against. So my vote is abstention.
Thank you. I'm delighted to see the 1% for the arts being utilized in such a integrated way, being the first opportunity to really put that policy into place. That really is exciting. Too many times our public art is kind of thought of as the afterthought and it's stuck on, and this is going to be a part of it, and I think that is very, very exciting. Definitely a way to help brand the bead, if you will. I mean, a lot of what makes Bloomington unique and special and vibrant is our arts community, but that's not the only thing. I want to make that clear. Our downtown is also comprised of civic buildings. People have to come and interact with Monroe County government and city government. It's not just all about entertainment and coming downtown for fun. People are coming downtown to work, make their livings, and to, again, help make this city the special place that it is, and we cannot disregard that. My last point is, if one is for this much-needed parking infrastructure that's going to help keep our downtown economically viable and thriving, it does not mean, and this zero-sum game just drives me crazy, it does not mean that we are not also for safer biking and pedestrian structures. Absolutely we must be. There's a lot of problems in our downtown that could use a creative eye and good design that makes walking safer and biking safer and the use of Uber and Lyft a lot more, well, safe and user-friendly. So there are many, many things we can do as we also look to transit. That's a part of the future, too, no doubt about it. But this idea that if somehow you support a garage, you are somehow the antithesis to the future and sustainability and our environmental health, that is simply not true. I just out of hand reject that notion. That is certainly not who I am. I will be voting in favor of this project. Thank you.
First, I want to thank the public who came out, both in support and in opposition to this project. I really appreciate the informed comments and the work that I know so many of you do to create your informed comments. So I really want to acknowledge that. It's persuasive to me. It makes me think. It makes me ask different questions because of your thoughtful deliberation and feedback. And that goes for both sides of this, if there are sides, and then everybody in the middle on this issue. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate it very much. I do think that we need a replacement garage. I am persuaded by the demand that I see at our Buzzkirk Chumley Theater and at Waldron and at Wonderlab that was raised today. I see people, when the Waldron, or when the BCT director asks if this is the first time someone's been to the BCT and more than half the hands are raised, and ask if you're coming from out of town, and we get a significant number of hands raised. I know those people are driving into our town and making it possible for me to bike or walk to the BCT because I can, to enjoy a performance I want to see locally. So that's important to me. I realize those are the trade-offs, but I'm grateful if we can have a garage that will allow them to keep coming to Bloomington so that I can enjoy performances and we can all enjoy performances locally, so I don't have to drive to Indianapolis to see that. The other thing that I think is really important to acknowledge about this project is I want to move it along quickly. I think we have a real safety concern with the barricades and the unsightly gravel pit that we have right now. I want to move this along. I want to get access to our walkways. I want to make sure that people can get through the alley behind by Black House and by all of the other spaces safely. So I would like to see this proceed as fast as possible to get this done and get it done well. I'm not bothered by the height. I like the explanation of consolidation. I do think we want to consolidate our parking as much as possible. I do appreciate the attention to the Silver Park Smart. I realize this is a controversial project, given, and not so much because of the project, but because of the time we're in, I think. We're in a real kind of, this is a point in time that it's an unfortunate time for our garage to have really gone downhill quickly. given the fact that I do think we need to reduce our consumption of fossil fuels. I mean, we're way beyond, needing to reduce. We got to really halt it pretty seriously. I want this to commit as much as possible to sustainability. I wish we could go for gold, Park Smart. It seems like, geez, it is the least we can do to go for silver. But I really want to push that. I'll be looking at that in this proposal to see how, to make sure that that happens, and that we also assure that the bioretention site is in, and that the environmental plan reviews that, and that we're planning for the most improvement to that alley as well. I think that can be a green alley. It is a wonderful space that could get greater access to Convention Center. I think there's some real potential to make that a really interesting walk route from Convention Center to other things on, like the Buskirk-Chumley. So I think that that's really an important thing to do, is to improve that corridor. Congratulations to Art Group, the commission, and Sean and the group to have this first integration of art. I think that's really important, and I want to see it realized, and realized well. And finally, I appreciate the comment from Jennifer Pearl about the garage making our city more accessible to people who can't afford to live downtown. I hope, or can't afford to live in single-family neighborhoods. I think that some of our surface lots could be converted to buildings and maybe more affordable housing if we allow this garage to go through. So I think we're talking about a lot of trade-offs. I realize it's hard to make sense of all this and to make it all balance out, but I'm hopeful about what this project might allow for the future. So thanks for everybody coming together, and I really appreciate it. So I'll be voting in favor of this tonight.
When we saw this plan, or the previous plan a few months ago, I really didn't like it. It was big. This is still big, but this is a much better design. The art makes all the difference in the world here. This is going to be a building that defines our downtown. It will be the largest structure in our downtown. And so it's important that we get this right. I'm not so concerned about the height. I'm well on the record saying that I think we need more tall buildings in downtown. We need to be more dense. I'm not excited about this being the tallest building around. So I'm hopeful that this will set a tone that leads to more creative density in our downtown, because ultimately, when you want to talk about goals of walkability and creating a lifestyle that doesn't require a vehicle, that's what we have to have, right? We have to have dense housing downtown where people can live within walking distance of everything that they need, and we're still missing that. Ultimately, that is the thing that as a city we can do to reduce dependence on the automobile, is let people live near the stuff that they want. So I'm hopeful that this will set a tone that will lead to more density in the downtown. I greatly appreciate the artwork, and I think it's going to make what could have been an iconically ugly building an iconically attractive building in the downtown. And I want to just encourage two things, really. One, as much solar as we can get in there. It really doesn't do us a whole lot of good environmentally to get people driving electric cars if that electricity is still produced by burning coal. So if we can get a situation where we're powering vehicles from solar power right where they're parked, that's ideal. So let's move as quickly as we can towards that. And secondly, the bioswale, bioretention, I think is really important. If we were looking at any other building of this size, we would be insisting on a living green roof on the building. So I think it's really imperative that we kind of set a standard here and incorporate that kind of feature into a project that the city is doing. So those are my comments. If there's nothing else, I think we're ready for a vote.
Whistler,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Herrera,
Abstention?
Kinsey,
Yes.
Schronkweiler,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
St. John,
Yes.
I believe that passes 701. Is that correct? All right, so that passes. That is our final agenda item this evening, and so thank you all for coming out. We are adjourned.